Please take a seat. I am, yeah, I think I'm on camera. So good morning, everybody. I'm the new Executive Director of the Public Design Commission, and I just wanted to take a moment to welcome everybody to our first hybrid Public Design Commission meeting. If you're joining us over Zoom and would like to testify, please sign up through the Google form link shown on our agenda on this slide, and also linked in our meeting agenda. If you are here to testify in person, please sign up on the sheet in the hallway, and we can begin. I'll hand it over to Phil.
Good morning. My name is Phil Ahrens. I'm the acting president of the Public Design Commission. We will now commence the committee meeting. The first project on the agenda is the preliminary review of the William Mcrae Playground, located between 138th Street, between Fifth Avenue and Malcolm X Boulevard in the borough of Manhattan. We will not hear public testimony nor vote on this project today. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you.
Is this on?
There's no amplifiers.
Oh, okay.
Just
Just-
directly to the Zoom feed. So
Okay.
speak back to the room, and then that will give audio to the Zoom attendees.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Sheena Brown. I'm the PDC liaison for parks. It's really so wonderful to see you all after 3 years. This morning, we are continuing our Community Parks Initiative, which many of you know began in 2014 and was an important part of the city's focus on equity. The program successfully reconstructed 67 sites throughout the city. Those were local parks that had seen little or no investment over 20 years. CPI became a model for us in several ways in how we engage with the community and multiple generations to provide the amenities and programs that people who use the park really wanted. And also in our design standards, making sure that we design for greater accessibility, we lowered fences, we maximized play value, and we increased the amount of green in parks. Today, we currently have $425 million in funding for an additional 100 projects over the next 10 years. We're very, very excited about that. We're so excited to show you the schematic plan. This initiative is an important part of the city's COVID recovery plan. We're working alongside the mayoral task force on racial inclusion and equity to reconstruct parks in neighborhoods that were hardest hit by COVID. I'm very pleased to introduce Ben Nicolosi-Endo. He's our one of our great landscape architects on our Manhattan team.
Sheena. Good morning, all. I'm happy to be here with you today and appreciate the opportunity to present this design. My name is Benjamin Nicolosi-Endo. I'm a landscape architect with the Parks Department, and I'm the project manager for William Mcrae Playground. So our total budget for this project is $5 million, and the overall size of the project is just under $500,000. Our goals, which are derived from the feedback that we received in our community input meeting, are to upgrade active play capacity for the park and neighborhood, to facilitate passive use and community events, to enhance and add to the environmental amenities of the site, and to improve access, circulation, and sightlines in the park. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the comments that we received a little later in the presentation. So William Mcrae Playground is located in central Harlem along West 138th Street. This is a bird's eye view of the playground, just giving a little bit more context. To the west, there is a school. Children often during recess use the playground. And there's the Madison Avenue Bridge, which has an off-ramp that leads directly onto West 138th Street. The site is elevated, so it's outside of the 100-year floodplain, so there's no major risk. However, you will notice that there's this light blue color here, which indicates that it's in the future floodplain for 2050, which poses very minimal risk, however. And we always make sure to consult these resources for any current or future flood hazards. The surrounding land use is primarily residential and institutional. The major commercial corridor is along this red line here, which is Malcolm X Boulevard. There are a few parks within a 5-minute walking distance of Mcrae Playground, the closest being Fred Samuel Playground. However, that site is a little bit larger, so it has a few more amenities, such as a comfort station and adult fitness. And this is a plan of existing conditions. So there are 3 entrances from West 138th Street, indicated by these magenta arrows. You'll notice there's no arrow leading into the play area, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But when you walk in the central area, there are a few game tables to your left, a spray shower, and to the left side is the basketball court. And because of the size limitations of the park, it's a smaller size, it's approximately a junior size basketball court. And moving to the right, we have play equipment for a variety of ages, swings, and the perimeter fence at the front of the playground is about 7 foot high. This site analysis shows the issues that we really want to address in our design. First and foremost is the area of subsidence in the play area. The play equipment is outdated with our standards. The basketball court is damaged. There's a flagpole in the central area that's sort of hidden and is covered by tree canopy. The spray shower is currently inoperable, and the sidewalks are currently damaged and have empty tree pits. So there are quite a lot of trees on site. There's about 35. So roughly 50% of the park is covered by tree canopy. Most of the trees are in healthy condition. However, there are a few condition removals. And because there's so many trees on site, the playground receives quite a bit of shade. Also, the playground is in the center of the block. So primarily the sunniest areas of the park are in the central area. And this was the subsidence I was talking about earlier. You can see on the right, there's ground depressions in the playground, and on the left, a locked entrance to the playground because of those subsidence issues. These are the play units. Another play unit for older children on the left, and swings, which currently lack an accessible seat. The spray shower in the central area, and game table is just to the left of the entrance. The basketball court on the left, and there's a northern fan bed area that's situated between 2 fences, and this fence on the right is just outside of our property line. And these are the sidewalks just outside of Mcrae. You can see they're cracked and damaged. So we want to reconstruct this area and also plant new trees in the tree pits where the trees are currently lacking. So back in January, we had a very successful community input meeting. We received a lot of great feedback. Initially, there was a lot of talk about having a comfort station on site, but however, because the site is not that big and the footprint for a comfort station is quite large, that would mean that some of the other programmatic requirements would have to take a back seat. So after some discussion and also talking about how there's a comfort station just around the corner at Fred Samuel Playground that I mentioned earlier, the community decided to focus on other needs. And so some of those needs were to have a reconstructed basketball court. They really wanted a nice large turf area, a place that could be used for free play, passive and active use, exercise, games. Security lighting, there's currently no security lighting at all on site. They also wanted more exciting play equipment, more tables. Actually, there's only 2 game tables, but they wanted an area for picnicking because there are a lot of events that happen at the playground. More seating options and a more exciting spray shower. And this is our schematic design. So that's based on the community feedback that we received and also the analysis that I showed earlier. And I think we were really able to meet a lot of the community's requests. So you have a consolidated entrance. Right now, you walk in through the center, past a lower perimeter fence that will be 4 feet high. And you come into a nice, generous picnic area with some seating and a nice big turf area in the central area. And we relocated the flagpole to a more prominent position in the center of the park. And to the left, we have new game tables, including an accessible game table and a new basketball court. And now the basketball court has seating as well, so spectators can watch games if they choose. Right now, there's no seating within this area.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm just curious, this is kind of a mixed-use park. If you go to different residential areas of the city, you find parks of this size that are designated to either teenagers or to older people or to young kids. Why did they decide to do mixed age grouping? Just because it's a grandmother, I take my kids to the park, and I like a park that is designated for a certain age group. I just think for families, it's sometimes easier. I'm just curious about the surrounding parks. Pardon my ignorance of that particular location, although I opened quite a few schools there, so I'm kind of aware of the location. Why this was done as mixed use. It's not like young families have a lot of great options.
Right. So
To young teenagers, so I'm not, coming out on one side or the other. I'm just curious what the thought is.
sure, yeah. So a lot of these design decisions were based on the community feedback that we received. So they really wanted to maintain many of the features that they have there now. So that includes the play equipment area, a new basketball court. So I will say that there's a school just adjacent to this park, and right across the street is a senior rehabilitation center.
Okay.
So the one of the
Will the school have access to the basketball court?
yes, yeah. And they also wanted a nice seating area and tables for the seniors who often use the park as
I
well.
understand completely. I'm just curious how these decisions are made.
What age school, what school is it? What is it, primary? Is it?
It's it's a primary school. It goes
It goes to 8th grade.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Thank you.
And it's not like they have a great gym facility or anything. So the truth is that at certain times of the day, this park is going to be for young kids between the ages of, 10 and 8 and 12. And, then it becomes limited to young families, et cetera, et cetera. I'm so curious. And part again, my ignorance. I apologize up front. What time will the park close?
Park generally closes in the evening. I'll say somewhere around 8 p.m. 7, 8, yeah, it's generally when it closes. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
thank you. So there will be a new spray shower just to continue off to the right side of the playground. It'll have a variety of features. There'll be some ground flush spray features, which will allow more open space, more runaround space within the playground. Some new exciting play equipment, some new swings with an accessible seat, and a lot of additional planting to make the area much more comfortable and enclosed. This is a bird's eye view of the playground looking east.
There are no real playgrounds in that.
And this is the entrance into Mcrae playground. So it opens up onto this nice picnic area, a generous turf area, and you'll notice that we have a chevron paving pattern there, and that's a nod to William Mcrae and his military history, his rank and service. He was a local man who fought for the Harlem Hellfighters in World War I, fought and died, I should say, and we'll have appropriate signage, historic signage, talking about William Mcrae at the park. Rounding the corner, this is a view into the new spray shower area and play equipment. And this is the play equipment that we're proposing. Try to keep it light and airy with a lot of natural forms and colors. That was something that was requested by the community. This is play equipment for smaller children, wider area. Play equipment for older children with a lot of challenging climbing features. That was something that was also requested. Spray shower. So as I said, we try to keep it open to maximize play value. We also have a fun puck scheme, full feature here, that's very similar to the colors and forms of the play equipment that surrounds it. We'll be using standard furnishings. These are furnishings that have proven successful and reliable in the past. And this is our material palette, trying to keep things very sort of muted, with very comfortable materials. This is our lighting diagram. As I said, there's currently no security lighting in the park. So we're proposing 5 security lights, pedestrian poles, to make the space more safe and usable. And this is our fence diagram. So we'll be lowering the 7-foot steel panel fence along the front to improve sight lines. And within the interior of the park, we'll also be keeping fences low. And they'll only be higher when necessary for safety reasons, as around the swings and the basketball court. And these are proposed, the proposed fences, what they may look like. This is our plant palette. We'll be using native plants, trees, shrubs, perennials, grasses, and shade-tolerant species where necessary. And with the additional planting, we'll be increasing the permeability roughly by double, from 8% to 18%.
Are those tiles permeable? Are they those chevron?
No, those aren't permeable, but we'll be placing, we'll be pitching water to the planted areas in the rain gardens to help reduce stormwater runoff. And lastly, the schematic design plan once again. And I just want to add that we went back to the community in June and we received a lot of positive feedback. And they were quite happy with the design, and they felt that we really addressed many of their needs. And eventually we received unanimous approval from the board. So I'll leave it there for any additional questions or comments. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, any additional questions to the?
Tell me about the location of the flagpole and how you selected that center location for it.
Sure. So the flagpole right now is roughly in this area towards the back of the site.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hidden by the tree canopy. It's actually the top of the flagpole is damaged. So we wanted to move it to the center to make it more prominent. There was also talk within the community meeting about William Mcrae and the history. So they wanted something that would sort of reflect the service and history of Mcrae. So we put it there, and we thought it would be a more visible area, and it wouldn't be competing with the existing trees on site.
So if you do a monument or a plaque or something, it'll probably be near that flagpole. What's your?
Yeah, we will have historic signage. We tend not to do plaques within the parks. I will say that they're right around the corner, a few blocks away near the armory. There is a memorial to the Harlem Hellfighters, which I'm going to pay for.
I had one question to follow, just maybe a real question. I don't know who directed to. Just thinking about it while Meryl was asking her questions about who it's targeting. So when you have a park, you showed us in the beginning that there are a couple of good parks nearby. At the Parks Department, do you analyze who served at these? I mean, we hear about that, so that's what you do. Analyze who served at these other parks, and then through that analysis, you determine, because of course the community would want everything. I would. Everybody wants what their own desires and needs are. So, but you have a kind of larger, So
Yeah,
that was part of that decision process.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, context is always taken into account for all of our design decisions. So as I mentioned earlier, that there was initially some discussion about having a comfort station, for instance.
Right.
However, there's a few comfort stations just within a few minutes walking distance of William Mcrae Playground, Fred Samuel, and also Howard Bennett. So in order to meet the other community needs, if they wanted basketball court, a turf area, it's just a matter of having those discussions with the community and seeing what their priorities were. And also the basketball court, for instance, that was currently on site. It's a smaller size basketball court, but the community was fine with that because they knew that there's a few other playgrounds within the vicinity that have basketball courts and other sports features like tennis and pickleball.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Parks is a happy department.
Yes.
Parks is a great department, just joy.
Well, this is a classic example, seems to me, of addressing the needs of as many groups as they could. And they come the time one done how late it's open, the basketball court, they were doing everything, and it was pretty good.
Okay. The next committee item is the conceptual review of the construction of a greenway and daylighting of Tibbettsbrook between West 230th Street and Hester and Piero Mill Pond in Van Cortlandt Park, Bronx. We will not hear any public testimony, nor will we vote on the project. So welcome, and you're free to proceed.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alicia West, and I'm DEP's Director of Public Design Outreach.
Yeah, we got it.
I'm gonna stand close to you guys. I think I'm still 6 feet away. My name is Alicia West, and I'm DEP's Director of Public Design Outreach. We're really excited to be here to present the Tibbettsbrook project with you this morning. So today I have with me Dahlia Thompson from Houston. She's going to do the bulk of the presentation. I also have Kristen Rosigliano from DEP and Mitchell Loring from Parks and Planning. So we also have a few teammates on Zoom joining us that way. So this is really my favorite kind of project because it kind of does double duty. So it's addressing very real, concrete environmental and public health needs, but also simultaneously providing open space that is meeting New Yorkers' physical, social, and cultural needs. So this project will be the city's largest green infrastructure project to date. And it plays a critical role in DEP's long-term control plan for controlling combined sewer overflows. We call those CSOs. You'll hear Dahlia say that, into the Ohio River. We'll also realize the extension of the Putnam Greenway for about a mile, creating important recreational and transportation alternatives for this community. So before I turn it over to Dahlia, I just want to say that we've also been working very closely with the community in the Bronx, and we, based on some of the feedback that we've gotten specifically from our Community Board 8 review, we're going to take a little bit of a look again at some of the southern portion of the Greenway. And Dahlia will speak a little bit more to that, but we didn't want to hold up our conceptual review with you all. We really wanted to get your feedback early in the process as well. So I will stick around for questions, obviously, but I'll hand it over to Dahlia now.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll stand over here so everyone can see the slides. Thank you for having me. This is a packed project, so pardon me, I'm gonna try and go pretty quickly to get through things, but if there's any questions, hopefully there'll be time after. So as most, I would imagine most of you know, this project is located in the northern Bronx, connecting the southern part of Van Cortlandt Park down to the Harlem River. And it's a portion of it will be, a portion of this project will be a full daylighting from the Hester and Piero's Mills Pond, which is formerly known as Van Cortlandt Lake, down to approximately to 30th Street. That portion will be daylighted, and then it will be piped through the Metro North rail yard right of way. We'll be focusing our presentation on the Van Cortlandt Park and CSX portion of the project, the public portion of the project. This project, as Alicia noted, is going to provide CSO benefits for DEP by taking the water that is currently going, currently Van Cortlandt Lake goes into the Broadway sewer through a pipe, and we'll show some pictures of that. And that is the combined sewer system. So that water ends up at the Ward's Island wastewater treatment plant on an annual, like on a daily basis. So during dry weather, all of that fresh water is ending up in the combined sewer system. And then during wet weather, when the system is overtaxed, that ends up overflowing at this outfall. So this project will take a base flow, so the normal base flow of water that gets into the lake, and daylight that, as well as some portion of the wet weather flow up to 38 cubic feet per second into the channel, and then the larger storm events will still continue to flow to that combined sewer system. And then this is a great project from a synergy perspective, because this is really something that has been part of the Parks Master Plan as well, to provide daylighting for the Tibbettsbrook, restoring that natural floodplain that used to be there along this area. And you know, so we're able to work together and make this project happen. So as noted, this was the existing weir structure at Hester and Piero Mills Pond. And from here is where the water goes on a daily basis out to the combined sewer system. This is one of our views of where the daylighting is going to take place. The start of the stream. There's a side view of the same area. The water side here is going to be located here. So where we're going to take some of that flow and divert it over to this area. And we were standing, the previous picture was there, so it's just going to come through, and then this is looking downwards going into that channel. The stream will be located here, background there, and this area is going to end up becoming pocket wetland, and the circulation you'll see in our design is going to be relocated. Another view of that same area. This is the existing abandoned rail corridor that runs adjacent to where our spring daylighting is. And so that's going to be turned into the Greenway within an extension of Putnam Greenway. This is an area in that future channel. And then as we move further south, here's the area just north of Van Cortlandt Park South at the bottom of the parks property. And then this is what it looks like at the start of the CSX corridor adjacent to the major digger. Some more views of that same area, looking just north instead of south, and then down by 237th Street. Just an example of some of the photos from, this is one of the adjacent buildings. Some of those areas of the corridor are very constricted because of adjacent buildings. We have some existing encroachments from the fence that we're going to have to work with the adjacent property owner on. Adjacent buildings in some disrepair. And then some more photos of some of the existing conditions. Winter months are a little less green, but this is going to be where we'll have an exit from the property. So to give a project overview, we'll end up going through some of the Bank Portland Park first, and then into CSX. So just familiarizing you. So I'll talk about this area first, and then come down to there. So as I noted, we're installing a side weir, small structure. We'll see some renderings of that. That will become the head of the stream, and then we're using a riffle pool morphology with a meander, a pretty natural stream corridor. We have space for some floodplain in here, so that'll be incorporated. And we'll be removing a lot of the invasive species that are present in that area to make way for this new stream channel. And then that boardwalk that we saw in the background on some of the photos, that'll be rebuilt as more of a berm area so that this existing wetland area is going to continue to kind of function the way it does. And we're not going to end up flooding that area. As noted, we'll bring the pathway around the area that currently, this is where that blue bridge was, where the circulation currently goes. And we are also adding 2 bridges over just north of Bank Portland Park South, and a new bridge to the parking lot to replace this lost access over here. Just a highlight of those circulation patterns that we were discussing. Show a few cross sections and renderings. So as discussed, here's the side weir that we are building. The look here is to mimic the existing viewing platform that's adjacent to the existing weir structure. So we're going to match those along the lake. At the head wall of at the start of the daylighting, looking at using similar fencing to what is present on on some of the Putnam Bridge already. Allows when you're sitting to be able to see through, but open to still discussing other options as well. As noted, kind of the riffle pool morphology that will be incorporated, pocket wetlands. Also creating an overlook at that Blue Bridge area in that space that had been the stairs previously. And some cross sections through the park. There'll be opportunities for some overlooks along that bridge walk as well. And there'll be a bridge. We are also incorporating manhole that will allow for water from the Drone Park Reservoir that is nearby to also daylight into this channel. Currently, that water, when they need to draw down the reservoir for operational purposes, currently goes into the combined sewer system as well. Connects also to the Broadway sewer. And so this will allow them to discharge into it's fresh water, and so we'll be able to discharge into this freshwater system, thereby avoiding sending it to the treatment plant. So another opportunity for synergies. And it's a large manhole, but our plan is to screen that with vegetation. It'll be off to the side, and it will be probably stone faced in order to blend in more with the surroundings. As we move into CSX. I just want to highlight all of our, big picture where the circulation entrances and exits are taking place along this corridor. So we have, there'll be an entrance to the corridor at the existing mill dam by Hester Piero Mills Pond. From the parking lot, there'll be multiple entrances, including the bridge. We have the Bank Portland Park path just north of Bank Portland Park South. We had been in discussion with Parks about whether that was going to be stairs or ramp. It looks like, well, and what we've ended up since this presentation had been submitted is there will be a combination of the two that we kind of agreed upon what the tree impacts will be, and we're able to make that work. We will have a ramp at 239th Street. We are in discussions about adding in grade access at 236th Street, most likely. Requires access through private property, but it's something that's going to be discussed. Then at 234th Street, as well as at Revealing Place. And what's under discussion is at Albany Crescent, potentially adding in a bridge over the Deegan that would be connected to a future DOT Greenway project, not part of this scope specifically, but looking at how it could potentially have synergy with that. So that's something that's in discussions, and how that would get funded is kind of in the future. And then we've also been discussing potential other options for emergency access at other locations, adding in stairs. But as you'll see, it's a very narrow corridor, so we're trying to balance access and greenway space. So we're going to walk through this corridor. At 239th Street, we have an opportunity in this open space for a kind of plaza entry area with access to the water. And in this location, we have space for a wide channel. So when we're talking about, you'll see some cross sections, we're talking about a wide trapezoidal channel. And then we end up moving into what we're calling a narrow cantilever channel, which will have a straight wall on one side. And the path will actually cantilever over the stream. And this is the part that is probably up for discussions the most with the community and within the design team of how we can optimize that design and make it feel open as much as possible, even in these constricted areas. And so there's space in this area for some benches. We're looking to try and enhance vegetation as much as possible where we have space. So this area, as we're moving from 237th Street down to 234th Street, there's another building here, the BJ's, and this is pretty narrow. And this is where we're looking at, coordinating with that private property owner. And it was going to be mostly a cantilever channel in this area. We are looking at options at 234th Street as well. I think that we've decided to come down that this will end up being a ramp, but that was something that it is very tight in that area. So it's been up for discussion. And we do have some spaces for benches once we get past 234th Street. And we then have that open channel, the wide channel, until we get down to Revealing Place. And then we'll have an intake structure in this area that will allow for the water to transition from the open channel into a pipe, and then that pipe then continues out to the Metro North corridor. And so some renderings and cross sections. Here is what we're thinking this will look like. We have heavily vegetated side slopes for the channel and space for this open area for the ramp and the plaza, as well as space for people to stand off of the greenway that's passing through as they're entering the corridor. By the exit, some space here. There'll be a ramp, probably ramp and steps, and a steeper ramp for maintenance access as well. And so just in, a little kind of zoom in more on what a typical wide cross section looks like. We'll have stones, but with planted with vegetation in between. In some spaces, we have space for vegetated strip between the open channel and the Greenway, potential seating area where that we have that space on the building side as well. An example of the wide, what the wide cross section would look like. And then a narrow cross section, typical narrow cross section, as I noted, cantilevered. What we're looking at is potentially bumping that cantilever out to give a little more space from the buildings, a little more space for planting and trying to open up that field a little bit more. That's an example of what the cantilever green looks like. And just a photo of what an intake structure looks like. So this is an example from another DP project in Staten Island. Wouldn't look exactly like this, but something of that sort with a trash rack along the surface to keep the debris out from the pipe. Some examples of our typical typology that we'll be using within Bank Portland Park: benches, World's Fair benches, deep hole light fixtures, steel picket fence in places that are not impeding views. That's more typical of the Bank Portland Park typology, educational signage, and then trying to incorporate porous asphalt where feasible. We'll have bike racks, some removable bollards. And then as we're moving into the CSX corridor, the benches would likely be the 1964 World Fair benches, the more modern deep hole light fixtures. We had a comment on the fencing and whether we could continue to use the more mesh fence, and that's something that will likely change. All the bullpen slides are about access. So if you have specific questions about access.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question. It's not just specific about that specific fencing, but
Yeah.
Is there a landscape architect? You guys are water engineers, engineering. Is there a landscape architect?
Yeah, Hazen has a.
We have a landscape architect on at Hazen.
What department do you with?
DEB.
DEP. But you're the consultant with
Yes.
Hazen Sawyer, and
Yeah.
then you have a landscape architect on your staff.
Yes.
Designer.
Yes. Yeah.
Because my question was really, I mean, I know you have limited, I think this is a fantastic project. It's incredibly exciting to do something like this. And I don't know what the length of the whole thing is. It's
About a mile.
A mile.
Yeah, of
So
the
it's
open.
great. But I was just wondering, because you have so many different types of things, that if there's any way, and it doesn't have to cost money, but just if somebody was in charge of all those things, and that they would conceptualize them as being all related to each other, because then you would feel like you're part of something. When you go to a national park and you go take a walk and look at some little creek and everything is controlled in a way, almost, it's not one eye, but by one set of design standards. And, it's like 1939 bench here, 1964, it's just, I don't know, it's just, I think it would be so, in a brand new way, to be able to identify this thing as one thing. And so I don't care if it's, I was thinking just wood, you got a wood, you go with wood, and then just put mesh in when you need it. I'm not the designer, but it's just, if somebody with an eye could take charge of this, it would just, and it doesn't have to cost any more money, I'm not trying to spend money.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to use the money in a way that would better the project, that for its identity, its legibility, is kind of environmentally, it's like environmental signage in a way, because it signifies itself through that.
Okay, so looking for more consistency throughout so that it really speaks
I'm looking for
to.
consistency. not
Okay,
just
absolutely.
consistency.
So, we are working with the Parks Department, and this is an extension of, the Greenway in Van Cortlandt Park, and a lot of it is in Van Cortlandt Park, which has kind of its own aesthetic in a lot of ways. And so we've been kind of taking Parks' lead on
That's why I
selection of.
asked what department you were.
Yeah, so we have our friends, Mitchell Loring and Sheena Brown are both here from the Parks Department. We've been, our teams work really, really closely together on this, but totally hear you in terms
So
of
maybe
consistency.
it should be directed. I don't know, where, over here.
I agree with what Alicia said. Yeah, we are working together and, sorry, yeah. Yeah, we are working really closely together on this project, and since this is conceptual, we're, figuring
Right,
out the
yeah,
nuts
that's
and
why it's a
bolts
great
still
time to
and
be
getting to that point where we'll have hopefully a unified design language. That's definitely a goal of ours.
Right.
But there is, as Alicia was just saying, a big section of this Putnam Greenway already exists within Van Cortlandt Park and has its own aesthetic that's in the park, and it's kind of rustic in certain areas. So particularly the sections that are within the park, this southern portion that is not built yet within the park, our idea is to try and match what exists, the continuation of it further north within the park, and using those design materials that already exist all throughout the park. The CSX corridor is kind of the newer, more interesting, confined, constrained corridor that'll have this waterway and is in not the lush natural setting that it is inside the park. So that's why we're thinking right now, maybe we would be leaning towards more of our modern design set for this area. But once we get a little further along, we'll definitely be looking at the existing piece of the Greenway in the park, this new section of the Greenway in the park, and this new section of the Greenway south of the park, and making sure they all speak to each other.
I mean, you have 2 bridges coming, you have 2 overlooks. I mean, you have all these things, right, that are going to be designed by somebody. So that's what yeah, I don't know if I agree with you, but, I understand what you're doing. I just think it seems so important to give it an identity.
Yeah.
Rather than,
I think the sense of continuity from the departments, I agree with that as well. That it's of a, it's part of a larger system. The larger umbrella system is parks. This is the instantiation of Van Cortlandt. This is an extension of it. So I think having a kind of sense of continuity, whether that's design elements or even signage in some way, like marking the entry points, for example, and indicating that connects to the park. And even just saying that it's an extension of that versus, a new kind of entity unto itself.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Marking that it's an extension of, an existing park rather than like, an entity unto itself. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean like a logo or, anything like that, but just this, a design sensibility that, has a continuity. Identity, I think is a good word, but continuity, I think too, is another one.
Yeah, we appreciate all these comments.
I really, I'm so impressed with the initiative and the effort, and this is the best, I think, that I, as I'm aware of, planning and responsiveness to both the natural, ecological, environmental needs and those of the surrounding community. And I, in my lay fashion, am echoing the wonderful comments just made by my colleagues. And along the way, I was looking at, and then I fixated on something in your progress, like a private developer, and you still have to negotiate with that developer or that property owner. And it was a small thing, but I thought, okay, so what's that about? And what are you saying to, what is the consistency? And yet there's a different kind of landowner there. And then, of course, I kept thinking and said, who's in charge of making all of these extraordinary, important improvements really be both innovative and yet be consistent with what is going to be a terrific initiative. So I guess I'm echoing some of this and terribly impressed with the effort, but recognizing we got to know more. And I dread, but all I could think of in the back of my mind is, and what's going to happen with the Major Deegan Expressway and the mess of that, and it would. Okay, that's another. But it's not. It's things I was echoing. it's the aesthetic, but I'm also thinking of who will be in charge and who, as you go forward, in what time frame will, what the criteria will be for both innovation and then coherence and of the entire extraordinary and commendable efforts.
Well, thank you very much for saying all the nice things you said about this project. It is one of the cooler projects I've had the pleasure to be able to work on, and these teams are amazing, and the amount of community outreach that's happened related to this project is really impressive. And we've got some really excellent feedback from folks in the community. Our team did a site walkthrough with a bunch of people, and we really got a lot of good ideas that are influencing how we're thinking about this. So it is a joint project, like a very joint shared project between DEP and Parks. And as we move along in terms of design, you know, we're pulling from obviously feedback from this commission, feedback that we're hearing from the community, and they have a lot of opinions, of course, about how this is going to look and feel. In terms of maintenance, you know, Parks and DEP are figuring out how that's all going to shake out. That's going to be a really important piece of this. As you said, we're right by the major D. So all of that stuff, you know, we are still very early on, and it is all stuff that's on the table, and we're figuring out as we go, but all very important points. Thank you so much.
So I agree with all of my colleagues about how great the project is. I'm a little nervous about a couple of things. I'm very nervous about the term daylighting because I believe it's completely non-understandable as a concept. You're not really daylighting anything. You're creating a new, right, artificial waterway with an adjacent walkway on what was maybe once an existing stream, which was previously converted into a subterranean sewer pipe, correct? So daylighting seems to be non-descriptive in a way that doesn't help you for such an ambitious and interesting project. I think the CSX part of it, based on my own and the city's experience with, say, the High Line, which was also a CSX owned structure, is challenging. If you build a linear park, the High Line, which was built for 300,000 people and pre-pandemic had 7 million people annually, shows that if you build a linear park, people will walk on it because it's a fabulous thing to do in New York. It's fabulous to start in Van Cortlandt Park and walk along a waterway that sees a variety of different landscapes. That's what's so special about, you know, and you shouldn't worry about the fact that there are weirdly ugly buildings on the side. People kind of like that. It's New York. It's what an urban park is kind of about, particularly a linear urban park. I'm a little worried about the 10-foot pathway. 30 feet at the High Line was way too narrow, and that was 30 feet. I'm a little worried about it ending seemingly very abruptly in the middle of the Bronx without a sort of, I mean, the High Line kind of ends too. You can get over it. You can get people out into the city itself. They're fine. But you have to really think about how that works, whether it's sort of welcoming and adaptable. And people can really feel as though they're moving into something that's comfortable as where they entered at Van Cortlandt, or vice versa, depending on your flow. I love this project as much as my colleagues, but I'm nervous that just as we are so enthusiastic about it, I'm not sure you're designing for its success. And I would ask you to really think about that. I don't know. I know the constraints are challenging, but 30 feet yielding maybe a 10-foot path is maybe not the right balance. Again, I don't know, but I really, since we're here early, and I don't usually weigh in at this level of intensity, but I would say, I think this is a good time to start thinking about all that. Ethel's questions too, what are the relationships going to be? People will want to get there. People are not easy to deal with, private owners. They're not welcoming of everybody in the world coming through their property to get to a urban park. So there's a lot of issues. But I don't want to slow you down. But I don't know how my colleagues feel about it. I don't think something of this significance branded as a daylighting project makes at all sense to me. Just take
It's a
that for
little
what it's worth.
jargonish without.
I had no idea when I started
Yeah, I
reading,
didn't. I
no
wasn't
idea
sure.
what you were talking about. And I know this stuff. I mean, this is what I love. So they're just like, what are you talking about kind of response?
Okay, totally noted. I can't speak to exactly where that term came from, but the way that I always kind of think about it is the way that I think about a lot of our green infrastructure, right? When you think about the right-of-way
Karen, you're
bioswales.
gonna have to either put the microphone off.
It's not live to us.
Let's go to-
Because I can't, yeah, we don't hear you.
I know, sorry.
Bring it close.
So I can't speak to the origin of the term, but still use the term daylighting. But I think about it, the way that it makes sense to me is sort of how I think about all of our GI, right? So when you think about rain gardens on the sidewalk, what are we really doing there? We're peeling back the hard surface, the impermeable surface, and letting the earth do what earth does, right? Absorb that water, keeping that water out of the combined sewer so that we're not having these overflows into our local waterways, right? So I think that's sort of how I've been.
But you are building a concrete channel for the,
Yes. in some
so it's
places,
not
we're-
exactly, we're not digging up an existing flow and bringing the light to it in some Renaissance, sort of
Yeah. So I will,
moment.
we will think about the project that was built, I promise you.
Okay.
But I also want to speak to the other things that you brought up, because I think the Highline is a really great example for us to think about. It's sort of like, if you build it, they will come kind of phenomenon. And I will say that, this team, I've said it before, we're working really closely together. We're also working with DOT to think about the larger network of bikeways and how that's going to be developing in the Bronx. So there's a lot of exciting planning going on. And, as we said, we are early in the process and we have a lot of hopes and dreams for this. As everybody
Great.
does. So that comment is very well taken.
Great.
There's somebody on the Zoom named Piero.
Yes.
Should I?
That would be great.
Okay, we're gonna have somebody in on this.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to, I think that's a great comment that we received in terms of what is the daylighting means. It is a term of art that we've been using, for many, many years, and I think community is very aware of this. Like
Who is this person?
I'm sorry, I'm Pinar Balsi. I'm the assistant commissioner with New York City DEP, and my role is to coordinate this project. As you heard, it's initiated by DEP in very great partnership with the community and DPR. But I am kind of the person in charge in terms of the procurement, making the project and coordination role. So the reason we named the project daylighting is because we are looking at the buried streams, and this is known. Tibbetts is one of those buried streams. We have a couple others in Staten Island and also in Queens, Oakland Ravine. So there is that, where the streams are buried due to the urban development. We are looking at, can we bring some of that flow out of that buried pipes, which is really helping the end of the water quality, but also in other places helping with some of the flooding issues. So that's why we've been using the Tibbettsbrook daylighting to give that sense to the community that we are indeed daylighting a buried pipe, the Broadway sewer, and bringing that stream, the old stream, and improving the end of the pipe water quality. So we can definitely, call it some other term. I think Alicia called it, it's the largest green infrastructure project, but as a whole, I think the community is aware that this is indeed a daylighting, water daylighting project that is really going to help that end of the pipe water quality goals to be met. So I just want to, clarify that why it is indeed the daylighting and how it's really combines with this Greenway concept of the new park.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think what you're hearing is at least the commission's view, that the project really has to be put forward, designed, explicated, presented in a much broader context than a DEP project limited to daylighting a pipe to the surface. And that's just a concept we'd like to suggest, but your decisions, obviously, your agency. But we think it was kind of you to bring it and present it so early on. And I think it does not do the ambition of the project a service by calling it simply a daylighting project. I mean, it may be part of it, but it seems as though it's grown to be bigger and better, and we should we would like to urge you to embrace that, do the work that Lori initially suggested of making sure there's continuity, as Manuel suggested, for the whole project from the beginning to the end of it. Does that summarize, I guess, our?
Absolutely. Is they are all capable of doing what's been asked, because look at all the awards behind.
I know, look at all those awards, it's amazing.
A lot of awards, she's our back.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
There's just one more thing I would like to add, because we shared this with our commissioners who aren't present today, but they encouraged you to also look at how, or just clarify how adjacent buildings may be affected by potentially flooding because of this daylighting. And also consider potential ways that community members may use the waterway recreationally, whether you want them to or not. Ken had suggested that. And I think everybody else's comments. Deborah just requested to clarify if you're working with the hydrologist to design the waterway, particularly since narrow stretches may be where the water speeds up, and the balance between that and a wider pathway has to be considered.
great. Any more questions? Thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you.
project, very exciting. Good luck. I will now take a short break, right? Short break,
Let's say 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
It's a diverse.
Hold on, not yet. How do I turn this one off?
have any testimony at the moment, but if it comes up, we will share. So, okay, go ahead, Phil.
We will now begin the public meeting of the Public Design Commission with the consent agenda. Items number 28150 to 28174. Staff has noted no recusals. However, if there are any last minute recusals? No? Excellent. Let the record show there are no recusals. I'll now call for the vote of commissioners. When I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. Lori Hawkinson. Manuel Miranda. Susan Morgenthau.
Approved.
Ethel Sheffer.
Approved.
Merrill Tisch.
Approved.
And my vote will be for approval as well. Let the consent agenda show it is approved with the conditions noted unanimously. We'll now begin the public hearing. Item 27815, the reconstruction of a salt shed and interim compost facility as part of the Gowanus Canal combined sewer overflow facility, 2nd Avenue and 6th Street in Brooklyn. Per standard procedures, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed. Thank you. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Alicia West, and I am DEP's Director of Public Design Outreach. So I'm joined today by Kevin Keating from Seldorf Architects, and we also have members of our team from DEP, Skate, Brown and Caldwell, and Hazen on Zoom today. If any questions should come up that they need to address. So as Phil said, we're here to present the final design for the DSNY salt shed and interim compost facility along the Gowanus Canal. We were here in May to present conceptual designs, and the commission graciously commended the project. Thank you so much. We love it too.
Is this a DEP project
This is
or
a-
a DSNY?
This is a DEP project in partnership with DSNY.
Do you want me to recuse myself?
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Merrill.
So we don't have quorum.
But we'll have a recommendation from the
I
outcome
am
of this
more
meeting.
than happy to stay. I just don't want to do anything that puts us in harm's way.
I think she should be.
John, you know how I feel about all of you. You're doing a beautiful job. I don't know you, but you look like you're gonna do a great job.
Are we sure about the need for recusal? Doesn't that eliminate our quorum?
Eliminate your quorum. I don't mean to cause a problem. I just don't want us to do. Right. I mean, Department of Sanitation, you're a bit of a complex. That's why I asked. It looks like. Yes.
Okay.
See you shortly.
Zoom? Okay, great. So we were here in May, as I said, to present the conceptual level design, and the commission graciously commended the design. So as you might remember from that presentation, this is the first phase of work as DEP prepares this site for the construction of the Gowanus Canal combined sewer overflow facility. So that facility is a component of the overall Gowanus Superfund project, which is mandated by the US EPA. So we are on an accelerated schedule based on EPA, and there's a lot of moving parts for this. So we will be back to present to you DEP's CSO facility, our head house, and also a public open space, waterfront open space, about 1.8 acres. We'll be back with those elements probably in the fall. We've been holding public engagement meetings and workshops surrounding all elements of this project with a bunch of local stakeholders and the community at large. And they've had it's really helpful to hear from them to understand their priorities for the look and feel of this, of all of the project elements, and their priorities for the open space. That's been really critical in our early stages of planning, but again, more to come on the open space and the head house, but today, salt shed and compost. So I'm gonna hand it over to Kevin now to give the presentation, but I will stick around for any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Great to be back here in this beautiful space. So let me just take some time to walk you around the site, introduce you to the neighborhood and where we are, and what we're here mainly to talk about today. So the project is located in Gowanus. Gowanus is in Brooklyn. Okay. So this is part of a two-phase operation. To tell you the truth, we were here back in 2019 to introduce you to the CSO facility at the head end of the canal. We won a Public Commission Design Award for that. We worked in partnership with D-Land Studios for landscaping. As part of this project, we were down at the Alshead site, located basically in the middle of the canal, just before the canal bends and starts making its way north. We're working with landscape studios on the design for the landscaping part of that. So I'm just going to reorient the plan here. We are located at the north end of the IBZ zone, the South Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. We are surrounded by water on three sides. It is a peninsula. Right here is the 6th Street turning basin. One key element of the site is the F train viaduct. It exits Carroll Street Station over at this location and elevates to the viaduct where it's at Smith and 9th Street and 4th Avenue, both elevated subway stops before it makes its way to Park Slope and 7th Avenue. There's some great views from that train. This is one of them. This is as you're making your way into Carroll Street. Here's the site. As shown, there's about 1,700 linear feet of waterfront access, currently inaccessible, especially around the 6th Street turning basin. This indicates the location of the proposed salt shed, as we'll show you. This is another overview of the site. This is now from Smith and 9th Street Station, looking down on the site, due north towards downtown Brooklyn distance. So we'll just go into a bit of the neighborhood and the existing conditions. This is an aerial view. Luckily, it was during the site of construction of the existing temporary salt shed. You can see the shed there. Adjacent to it is the yard where they store their plow racks. On the left-hand side of that is the big reuse composting facility. You could see their aeration bays. In partnership with Big Reuse, there's Gowanus Canal Conservancy, which we are working with to hopefully introduce program into the master plan of the site. Right now, there's the 5th Street that bisects the entirety of the site, or I should say a portion of it up to about that point where it becomes private. That road will be demapped as part of the master plan. There is currently a number of industrial and manufacturing buildings, which DEP is working with to relocate elsewhere. And there's a private parking facility. Again, the current conditions right now allows no public access along 6th Street turning basin. This is a view of the site. This is now at the Whole Foods Esplanade, if you're familiar with it. This is the existing salt shed as it is. There's the F train viaduct in the distance. Quickly walk you around. Directly across the street on 2nd Avenue is a DOC facility. This is a view looking north at that 2nd Street entry. This is a view on 2nd Avenue. Again, very industrious IBZ zone. Looking at the F train viaduct. This is 5th Avenue as you make your way looking west. And this here are two images of the existing conditions right now. I just want to point out that this is the existing salt shed. It is currently unable to actually fulfill the obligations the DSMY needs to serve the community it's in. It was only supposed to be temporary. It stayed there for quite a long time. There's also an outpouring of their material beyond the bounds of the site. Their snow plows go beyond the fence, and they're extremely pinched into this. This is an existing view of the aeration bays for Big Reuse. Okay, so this is a simple diagram, but a diagram that indicates phase 1 of our operations. Again, the premise of this project is to build a CSO facility, but in order to do that, we need to keep DSY's operations operable at all times. So as Alicia mentioned, the salt shed is located on the north end of the site. We are going to reposition it south. will be an access alley. The salt shed itself will be placed in its permanent location. The yard will be slightly reconfigured when we go to this permanent condition. But that's only because we wanted to put composting in a temporary location now. And that was due to make sure that there was public access for compost drop off along Second Avenue. This is now really, again, a diagrammatic view of the facilities, the balance of the facilities that are needed. The salt shed, you can see it's in its location, slightly reconfigured yard. CSO facility will be on the north side of the peninsula. The tank will be on the ground, but again on the north side. And we are going to move what was composting, the temporary composting, which we're showing you now, and that's going to move westward so that they have combined facilities for both GCC and big reuse. So we just want to kind of show the area that DSMY has to service for this salt shed. So it goes all the way from downtown Vinegar Hill, Dumbo area, all the way through the Atlantic Corridor, all the way down to Park Slope, Windsor Terrace, and it makes its way even over to the edge of Owl's Head or just slightly north of Bay Ridge. So in working with DSMY, we obviously described, this is really an image that describes the fundamentals of this simple structure. Obviously they have salt. They need push walls to maneuver this salt against. Those push walls need to be made out of concrete in order to withstand the force of the front end loader pushing against it. And then we need to provide an enclosure above that that reaches a height that's able to accommodate the edge of a front end loader lifted vertically on top of the pile. This will obviously also help with any rain or elements that may pour on that salt. There's also a need for a ventilation opening gap in order to ventilate the air to make sure there's not buildup of any toxin. So this is a technical slide. You can see here a couple of key points. One, we're at an elevation 7 on 2nd Street. We have to get to an elevation of 14 plus at the salt shed. That's our design flood elevation. That's quite important. You can see how we're rapidly increasing the elevations as you make your way in through the yard and 2nd Avenue so that there could be a flat plate where the front end loader is pushing and maneuvering the salt and the trucks are loading. Another thing here is we need to accommodate 75 plow blades. They'll be placed on 25 racks that are distributed around the perimeter of the site. Just quickly jump to the next slide here. It's now the same view. Just jump to composting. They share the same entryway with composting. And this is composting's configuration in the temporary condition. Aeration bays, ground bays, composting office. Again, with access off of 2nd Avenue for public access to drop off their compost. Every shed or structure that does have a roof will have PV cells on top of it. This is now just a slightly view onto. This is the configuration of the lot in its permanent condition. We will be bringing in the DSMY salt truck along the access alley. They will stop here. The front end loader will gather the salt, load the truck, and they'll depart near the chloride tank that then will disperse the truck onto 2nd Avenue. This is good in a way where we're pulling any truck. If you've been around salt sheds during winter, there usually will be a line of trucks gathering. This allows that truck access to kind of gather along the access alley rather than 2nd Avenue or anywhere near the eventual public realm. And this is a roof plan and photovoltaics on top of the roof. So now the existing site. So again, as I mentioned, we're in the IBZ zone. The IBZ zone is a zone dedicated to manufacturing and industrial practices within the confines of the city. As you can see here, there's a low-rise monochromatic palette that we are looking to take advantage of and exploit. And in many ways, these are pictures we took that kind of talk to us about the grit of the neighborhood, but also what we're trying to achieve is a balance of grit and grace for this facility. This is a combination of materials, main materials that we're using for those 3 main architectural elements: concrete for the push wall, corrugation for the shed above, and a metal mesh for the enclosure behind. This metal mesh will be at the eastern end of the site where the fence is. I'll go into the next photo. Concrete for the push wall and the stainless steel corrugation over the shed itself. So those 3 main elements manifest themselves in these 3 ways. The concrete push wall rises to a height of 12 feet under the shed. That's the required height by DSMY. But what we wanted to do was dramatically drop that to about 2 feet along 2nd Avenue. This is where most of the public will be entering the entirety of the perimeter, the peninsula. And so we wanted to open up that view as much as possible. Second, here's the refined sort of clean, simple element of the corrugated metal panel above the salt pile itself. And thirdly, just to balance, fill out the perimeter of the site, there's the metal mesh. So quite simply put, we wanted to combine the idea of industry with what really are natural systems. This is really the key kind of component of Gowanus. We were working with our friends over at Scape Architects, along partnership with the community, to develop the planting plan along the 6th Street turning basin. This is all conceptual at the current moment, but there's an idea about multi-story planting along that edge. And then how do we treat ourselves and elevate ourselves again to a floodplain elevation of 14 feet. I'll just walk you around the site. When the image is black and white like this, it's the temporary condition showing where composting will be, again, along 2nd Avenue. The salt shed will be built in its permanent location. This is the salt shed on the west side, showing that reveal between the two forms. Composting there behind the 6th Street turning basin. Eventually that will all be open and the public will be able to come up and access the 6th Street turning basin. This is a view from 2nd Avenue, looking towards the shed. You can see the simple refined form of the shed above the salt. And in the foreground, you can see the metal mesh, which provides access to the happenings and functions of the facility within. This is the view again in its temporary condition. Again, you can see composting here along 2nd Avenue, the salt shed beyond. This is a view from 2nd Avenue. Sorry, the access alley. This is where trucks will come up along 2nd Avenue and then enter into this sliding gate, and then they'll exit along 2nd Avenue. You can kind of see here the sort of forms and materials sort of sliding into each other, and then the separation of the two over here. Simple section. This is the view of again, the aeration bays, number of them needed. What they'll do is they'll start their composting in one of these bays, and eventually over time, they're moving those until they get to a point where they're moving them into the compost, which then either GCC use or it's open to the public to take. These are the simple yet refined forms of the details. We have the concrete push ball. Alignments are key in all our work. We have the shed above. We have slight detail in the corners with this invert. We have simple form that rises above. This will rise above so that there's a clean line, clean datum at the top of the roof. This is a detail of the salt lot. This is now at 2nd Avenue. You can see how the push wall comes down to a very low elevation, and the screen takes up the balance of that. It's just showing how it will engage the bottom of the push wall and support that in a cantilever manner to support the screen fence around it. And this is an image here of what we're hoping to achieve. In essence, creating an industrial yet refined building that sits gracefully and acts as a backdrop to the neighboring neighborhood. This is a view of the shed during its temporary form. And lastly, this is the model that defines the shapes that make up this facility.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we will take public testimony, if any.
We do not have anybody signed up to testify in person. Do we have anybody signed up remotely?
We have no one signed up remotely.
Okay, thank you. This concludes our testimony portion. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Other than it's very beautiful would be my comment.
I just had one question about I guess this is conceptual landscape, and he's elevating it for people, elevating around.
Yeah, so what the hope is that at that location there, that's where we're going to move the composting facility along with GCC, and all of those elements will need to be at an elevation of 14. So as you drop down from the sort of center of the peninsula, as you get closer to the water, we're going to try to drop that in certain areas as low as possible.
No, I think it's great, and I really appreciate the attention to detail and just the elegance and coordination of the landscape with the building, and that you are really celebrating this part of the city. It's important. Yes, salt is important. I don't know if it is important, but I mean, I think that we should see what we do. I think
That's right.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Are there any, it appears we don't have a quorum, so we won't be taking a formal vote. Is that correct? But it's still a good time if there are any, the agency would probably like to know if someone was going to vote no.
Right.
So, or have significant questions they should look to, so that maybe we would imagine next time would be on the consent agenda, correct? No, any other, no, it's lovely.
Yeah. It will be consented.
Sorry that,
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay,
for all your
thank
time.
you.
I
That doesn't hold
appreciate it.
you up.
okay.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. We should- Moving on to the next item, 28176 is the reconstruction of a landscape, North Meadow Recreation Center, West Drive and 79th Transverse Road, Central Park, Manhattan. For standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony, if any, will be heard, and then the commissioners will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. Thank you. You may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Elaine Adamizio. I am with Central Park Conservancy. I'm the vice president for planning. I'm here with my colleague Bob Rumsey, who heads our landscape architecture studio. We're here to talk about a project at the North Meadow Center, which is which is located north of the 97th Street Transverse that crosses the park south of the North Meadow ball fields. It's a facility. The building houses park operations staff, public program staff, and the site is occupied by recreation courts. There's also operational activity. Constructed as a maintenance facility to support the operations of the park in 1910. There's a storage yard, sheds. There were large concrete manure pits on either side, a refuse incinerator. This is the earliest view that we have of the facility. It's in 1919. Parks Department was giving away deadwood as firewood. And this is in the courtyard. You'll see that the building has changed over time, the exterior. And here's just a few views in 1934 before a renovation project coming into the facility from the south through these stone piers that still exist. You look through a central breezeway, you can see towards the back there's kind of operational activity at this time. It's still being used fully, the site for park operations. Entering the courtyard, turning to the right, you get a sense of the building. Again, this is all 1934, turning again to the right. This is a shed that had been added at some point that's no longer there. And you see the eastern wing of the building and the stone facade there. In 1934, Robert Moses became Parks Commissioner and launched a project to significantly redevelop this area of the park with a real focus on outdoor recreation. So it's at this time that the baseball courts were added, handball courts were added, and other recreation facilities. And work was also done at the building at this time in relationship to adding in public restrooms and some other recreation space. It was still also operational space, so some of the openings were changed. This is the most significant one, a door that was added where there had been windows to access operation space on the west wing. You can see the courtyard at this time. This is actually after the project is completed, but the courtyard is still used as a storage yard. You can also see that that facade has changed. It's been made brick with new windows. And this is just a bird's eye view to show the development of the handball courts on the north side of the facility. Also the ball courts, the baseball courts that were added. The courtyard is still being used for parking, and the building is being used at this point for a combination of the public restrooms and public recreation and operational space. This was used in 1965, and you really get a sense of the deterioration of the park at that time. It's in 1980 that the Conservancy is founded, and since then we've been restoring the park. We still use this facility as a combination of there's some recreational use, which is primarily our staff giving out basketballs and doing basketball clinics, and mainly operation space to support the operation of the park. So this is one of two primary operational facilities in the park to support the maintenance of the park. We have our yard down at the 79th Street maintenance yard, and then North Meadow Center really supports the maintenance of all this landscape on the north end. So the purpose of the project is really threefold. Renovate the public facilities, the courts and the restrooms, renovate and optimize vitally needed park operation space. As I said, one of two facilities really that support the operations of the park, and we really need to maximize that. And site work to support and screen the park operations. And with regard to the site work, a kind of main focus of that is I will note that we have been over the last 10 or so years converting our fleet of vehicles that support the park from larger and mainly gas-powered fleet to smaller electric vehicles. And so this will support our ability to kind of complete that. On the public recreation side, the scope of work is, or this is the existing site. You see we have the handball courts on the north side, a kind of unused asphalt area also on the north side. We have 3 junior basketball courts, and we have a full-scale basketball court, but that has until recently been mostly still used for parking for operational vehicles, and we would clear it out for special events and tournaments. We'll do a little quick tour around the facility, starting with the basketball courts. These are the youth basketball courts. You can see that we have a fence that protects the access through on this side, not on the other side, because as I said, until recently, it was primarily used for parking. This is that other side. You can see the striped court, full-size court, and the parking that existed until recently. Who's parking here? So it was a combination of Conservancy and Parks Department vehicles, and recently the Parks Enforcement Patrol had space in the building, which we've done some swapping of space. So the Parks Enforcement Patrol is no longer there, and we have been moving, as I said, making our fleet smaller, and part of this project is to move the parking to the outer edges of the facility, where there already is operational activity, and then to screen it. On the other side, the north side of the facility, these are the recreation courts. You see we have a chess and checkers tables along one at the eastern edge, and then turning to our left here, these are the handball courts. One of the things you'll notice is people are not playing handball, they're playing pickleball, which is there's been a major explosion in the popularity of this sport, and part of our project will kind of address shared use of the courts and providing more amenity for the pickleball court players. So the proposed plan, basically restoring and refurbishing all of the existing courts, adding 2 dedicated pickleball courts in that asphalt area, which has been kind of unused and underutilized. And we're also working in consultation with community groups in terms of some multi-striping of some of the other courts to kind of balance out the different user groups. Moving the restrooms and the kind of public facilities, which were in the kind of far corners, to the central spine, and then repainting these courts and adding a fence mirroring this fence on this side to create central access through and to locate the public activities on the central spine. So the building, very briefly, most of the scope of work of the building was under the purview of the Landmarks Commission, which approved it. So just very quickly, the scope is basically exterior restoration and roof. There were also changes to of some of the openings related to the reconfiguration of the use and the consolidation of the recreation towards the interior courtyard and the operations toward the outside. So some of the openings, a few of the openings have changed. And one of those is this door here, which was windows, which was the same case historically on the other side, making this a door to match that door in order to provide access into the locker space on this side. And that relates to the site work that Bob's going to talk about.
No, I need this. Hi, good morning. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Bob Rumsey. I'm a landscape architect at Conservancy. Just want to get a sense of, here we go. Okay, I'll speak to the site work improvements related to the park operations on the exterior of the building. Lane covered much of this before, but this is the North Meadow Center here in context of the northern part of the park. It's found on the 97th Street Transverse Road here. There is operations. Operations does exist here. It's limited based on the lack of adequate charging areas for this facility. So as a result, staff and cars and vehicles are going from the West 79th Street yard to supplement this on a daily basis, traveling across the park. So we're looking to improve upon that. Lane mentioned before about our transition from our gas operated fleet to our electric fleet. We call it our green fleet. These are obviously they're quieter on park paths, less of a footprint, and they really have become an integral part of our service throughout the park. They unfortunately are all stored right now, and primarily are all stored at West 79th Street Yard, traveling again back and forth on a daily basis. The goal of this project is site improvements to provide those charging facilities and storage for those units at North Meadow Center, so we can redistribute a large portion of those vehicles northward. This will obviously decrease the amount of travel across the park as well, which is also a bonus. Starting with our existing plan here, our existing site plan. This is the building, obviously. Essentially on the west and east sides of the building, these are really utilitarian areas as they exist now in nature. There's these existing below-grade boiler rooms on both sides with these stairwells that come to the surface. That comes into play later. I'll mention that now. There's an existing, the operations exist here really on the west side of the building. We have carts, charging and equipment, and then storage here. I'll take you on a tour around clockwise with some photos. Starting at the southwest corner of the building, there's this paved area, which is really used for carts to access these 6 storage containers. We're looking to get these back into these new storage areas. This is that west end of the building. Access into locker rooms exists. Going over to the west side of the building, we have cart storage with a secure chain link fence. This is what exists today. It's a limited footprint. And then looking at that same area from the north side, you can see how this materials of storage here is bled out into the park path. We're looking to improve that. I'll show you some images. And then going over to the east side of the building, there's storage that exists here today. You can see this stairwell that goes down into this, below grade utilities. These will remain in place, and there's just access doors that go to these boiler rooms below grade. Proposed site plan. The operations improvements on both sides of the building will look to define, contain, and screen and create kind of an organized back of house operations that will coexist with the recreation as well as the remainder of the park. I will show you some enlargements, but I want to talk on a few commonalities on this plan first. Charging areas. Cart charging areas on both sides. They're surrounded. It will be defined by an 8-foot-high black chain link fence, which is needed to secure these from the public. Storage that was here will be distributed into these 3 locations, and then surrounding these facilities, new facilities, will be landscape improvements to help screen them. At this northeast part of the site, we'll be creating a travel way into this cart charging area by taking the existing fence that exists on the east side and moving it westward. There's an existing path here just to the east of that. It's very infrequently used. There are some existing benches, group of benches that has an important connection to the landscape and a view here. We'll be maintaining those and improving upon those and accessing them with a soft surface path. The remainder of this will be removed. Jumping in to enlargements, this is existing on your left, proposed on your right. I'll start down here at the bottom. This paved area will be reclaimed for standard size vehicular charging, surrounded by landscape screening. There's an access path that will provide access for carts into this area, as well as staff into that area and into the locker rooms and restrooms. Car charging area here, storage, 2 areas here and here, and then a landscape buffer to help screen this area from the park path. And I'll show you a view looking in from here and a view coming up this path. This is an existing condition. You already saw this. We're looking to kind of organize and define this area, and then it will be supplemented with plantings that will really screen it. Similarly here, as you come up this path in the southwest, again, the same area that you're looking into here will be organized and fenced and then screened with landscape plantings. Going to the east side of the building, again, existing on your left, proposed on your right. Coming in from the north is that travel access pathway that I mentioned before. Storage units will be here, and then a cart charging area here, which is at the same level as the finished floor of the building. As we move south, this is that stairwell I pointed out earlier. That will remain south of this. This area really drops off significantly. You can see the contours here dropping off. In order to make this a usable sort of level area and create ADA accessible travel for staff into these locker rooms, we're using modest retaining walls here, system of retaining walls, which I'll show you in the next slides. Oops, just go back. I'll show you a view from here. This is the existing conditions. Oops, apologize. Existing conditions, building, keep in mind, the finished floor is here at the height of that water table. These windows will be replaced with doors. That's that stairwell I was mentioning before. You can see how this grade drops off. So our proposal is to provide a retaining wall, a concrete retaining wall surrounding the cart storage area. This wall is set inward and upward of the facade of the building. It's kind of tucked back in and will be screened with plantings. It's modest in height, 3'6" at its outermost location here. And then this stone wall comes around to create that ADA accessible travel way in front of the building. The character of this wall will match that of the building. We'll actually use salvage stone taken out of this opening. And it will be really a continuation of the wall that already exists around the courtyard. This is an unfiltered view and ultimately planted out, and it will be screened with seasonal plantings. And then a view that's a little bit further out, oblique angle looking back at the existing. Again, you can see how this will really disappear. These plantings, seasonal plantings will resolve that issue. And then landing back on our proposed plan, that's our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that rapid and lovely presentation. We appreciate
Tried
that.
my best, tried my best.
You did
Is that
well.
obvious?
Very, very, very well. Is there any in-person testimony?
We do not have any in-person testimony. Rebecca, is there any remote testimony?
There is no remote testimony.
No remote.
No.
Great, okay. So this concludes our testimony from remote and non-present participants. Commissioners, are there any comments before we vote? No? As always, excellent presentation by the Conservancy, so thank you for that. I will now do a roll call. Lori Hawkinson.
Approved.
Manuel?
Approved.
Susan?
Approve.
Ethel?
Approve.
Merrill?
Approved.
And I join with my colleagues and approve as well. So this item, item 28176 is now unanimously approved by the commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I believe, unless there's any other business, meeting is now adjourned. Good, great.
Bravo.